I've been thinking a lot about the idea of why, if we're following a good God, do we as Christians have to suffer? I recently started running, which is the first time I've run in pretty much my whole life. I've never been a runner, and I know that might be like a weird flex, but the reality is I've come to a place where I've realized, man, I'm not in shape and I'm not doing things to my body that are going to be beneficial in the long term. So I decided, I'm going to start running, I'm going to start taking care of myself, I'm going to start being more fit and more healthy. And just today, last night actually, during my run, I really messed up my Achilles tendon. Like I'm in absolute pain, and I just can't. I keep getting this thought in my head, and this thing that's running through me. Like, man, I'm trying my best to do good things for my body, to do good things for myself, to get into a healthier place, and it seems like along the way, nothing but more suffering is coming for it. Man, I'm in pain more than I've been when I wasn't running. I get to eat less delicious foods than when I was trying to be healthy. And I think oftentimes with that mentality, we can carry that over into our spiritual lives. Man, I'm trying to do good things for myself. I'm trying to do good things for my spirit, but I feel worse than I did before. And so as you begin your journey, or maybe you've been on the journey for years of following God and figuring out who He is, I guarantee you're going to ask the question at some point in your life, man, if I'm doing things that are good, why do I have to continue to suffer? And even deeper, if we get deeper, man, why do Christians even have to suffer? And I think sometimes in the church today and in the modern world, we can kind of get in this mentality of following Jesus is all rainbows and butterflies. It's, once you follow Jesus, everything gets better. Your life is good. You get to be happy. You make more money. All these great things come. And I'm not saying that those don't happen. But the reality is, I promise you that following Jesus is not an escape from the suffering you're going to face in this world. And so I kind of want to talk about three big things that kind of are the linchpin of what it means to be a Christian and suffer. And the first thing I want to talk about is, man, let me give you a hard fact. You're going to suffer. And when I think about that, I'm reminded of a quote by Martin Luther that says, if they gave our master a crown of thorns, why do we expect a crown of roses? The reality is suffering is going to come your way. And the Bible's actually full of different passages that really say, this is going to happen to you. And this is one of them. In 2 Corinthians 4:8 and 9, it says, we are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed. If we unpack that verse and look deeply at it, man, we see Paul is covering just about every type of suffering that you're going to face in life. Man, it's mental suffering. We're going to be afflicted in every way. It's physical suffering. We're going to be persecuted, forsaken, struck down. It's emotional. It's spiritual. The reality is suffering is going to be a part of life no matter what you do. And sometimes suffering is even going to be a part of life because you're following God. But I don't think that negates the God and the work that He's doing in your life. I'm reminded of the story of Job in the Bible, where we see a tremendous man who does everything that's right in the eyes of God, but undergoes suffering that most of us wouldn't even know how to walk through. And man, in the midst of doubt, of fear, of loss, he says, man, I don't know what's going on, I don't know what's happening, but I'm going to trust God. And so this is a reality that you have to come to and understand that, listen, there's going to be suffering in your life. But one of the beauties that Christ gave us is He gave us the church. And this is where we really get into the important heart of what it means to be a Christian. It means that even though you're suffering, you're not suffering alone. In Galatians 6:2, it tells us to bear one another's burdens. That our job is to make sure that we're walking through things with each other, that you're not alone. And for me, this is a difficult verse for me to walk out because I hate to share my suffering with others. I hate to be open and vulnerable and let people know, man, I'm struggling right now, and there's too many times that I try and fight battles on my own. But here's the reality. God has given us two avenues to healing and walking through suffering. One is to walk with Him. The other is His church. Both are equally as important. And I think we forget that a lot of times as Christians today. We think that if we just rely on God enough, then we'll make it through. But the reality is, He's given you a mechanism and an avenue through His church to undergo a suffering. To let people know, man, I'm not doing well right now. I need help. For me, as I limp around with my ankle injury and everything like that, man, I have a wife who is loving enough to bring me ice packs, to take care of me, to not let me be alone. And I know you may be enduring suffering, and you might have endured suffering for years in silence. But the reality is, God has given you a church to walk through the suffering with you. So I'd encourage you to be open and be honest with those around you, because, man, when we bear each other's burdens, we take a step closer to who God is. The other thing, and this is where it gets a little trickier, is sometimes we are suffering for the benefit of those around us. And some of those we haven't even met yet. And so this is a really powerful verse in 2 Corinthians again, where Paul is talking, and he says, God comforts us in all our affliction, that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction, with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. The reality is, man, God is going to comfort us and take care of us so that we can be a part of healing those around us. And sometimes you're going to endure suffering that you will not understand, you won't know, or you won't get the reason for. But it's meant to change the lives of people around you. I'm once again drawn back to the book of Job, and I can't imagine that when he suffered and lost family members, his house and everything, and he sat there by himself, he ever imagined that one day his story was going to impact millions of people. And the reality is, man, the suffering you're going through, the tragedy you're going through, it's meant to allow you to take steps forward and to allow you to comfort those who need your help. See, God might allow suffering to exist in your life so that when others walk in affliction and pain, they have someone who's by their side cheering them on, who understands what they're going through. And then this is the really hard part of suffering that I'm going to be maybe a little convicting as we talk about this. But the reality, and this is something that was opened up for me when I started to think about this little sermon or this devotional, was the reality that sometimes when we're suffering or when we're in affliction, we think we'll be a better person if our circumstances changed. So for me, I think about it this way. If only, I was a better pastor, or if only I had a bigger church or a bigger youth group, or if only I made a little more money, maybe then I'd be a better Christian, or I'd be able to do more things, or I'd be happier, or I'd be more joyful in what God is doing. But the reality is, man, if you can't be happy in the circumstances, well, not even happy, but if you can't be joyful and trusting in the circumstances you're at right now, man, when circumstances change, you still won't be content. And so as you walk through your suffering and your circumstance, I want you to ask this very deep question. If all of my problems went away, would I really be a better person? And I don't think you would. The reality is, God will trust you with what you have now. He'll trust you with the circumstances you're in. He'll put you in the circumstances that you're in so that He can change a heart. He can change who you are. Because you being better and being more content precedes the circumstances changing. You don't change because the circumstances got better. Your heart stays just as bitter. And that might be hard to hear and hard to think about, but the reality is, man, as you walk through this suffering, I'm hoping that you'll begin to find contentment and hope in God and in those around you, so that when those circumstances do change, it's a better person who's on the other side, not just a less afflicted one. I'm excited for what God's going to do in this journey as you think through, man, what does it mean to suffer? What does it mean to be alone? And I know that it can be hard to trust a God who allows suffering in your life. I know it's hard for me. But the reality is, he has a plan and a purpose for you. And I'm not going to sit here and promise you happiness, but I will promise you meaning and fulfillment. Because when we follow the God of purpose, man, we find contentment and joy.